Hello students, Mr. Yun here. Welcome to Chapter 20, Lesson 2. Today's lesson is on what we might call the more stereotypical Renaissance stuff. We'll talk about the resurgence of the classics like Greek and Roman literature. We'll talk about the Gutenberg press, which was kind of a big deal. And we'll talk about the Ninja Turtles. I'm just kidding. We're going to talk about some Renaissance artists that have the names of the Ninja Turtles. Or maybe the Ninja Turtles have the names of some Renaissance artists. We'll learn all about it. Okay, so we begin today in the 13th and 1400s. There was a new way of understanding the world, humanism. Humanism gave importance to the individual and human society, to gain knowledge through reason, not religious faith. So like we kind of talked about before, step back from religion, let's kind of look at things the way they are naturally. These thinkers, unsurprisingly, were called humanists. So if you studied humanism, you were a humanist. Sort of like a resurgence of the sciences. Humanism was based, well, on ideas of Greece and Romans. Here's the Roman thinking man. So the works of Greece and Rome had been largely lost and forgotten during the Middle Ages. That's part of why they were the Dark Ages. They were rediscovered during the Crusades when Europe came into contact with Muslim scholars who had maintained the works in their libraries. Petrarch was an Italian scholar that went around the monasteries. He was a big fan of the classics, and he would go around the monasteries in Europe looking for any works done in Latin, like any classics. Basically, the work of Petrarch and other scholars, they collected these classic works and other Latin documents and basically pulled them together and put them back in European libraries. So the classics were once more popular in Europe. They had been revived. There's Petrarch and his funny leaf hat, which is like almost every picture of him had a funny leaf hat. I don't know what's up with that. So there was this renewed interest in Roman and Greek classics, but writers started to write new stuff as well. And some even stopped writing in Latin, which we said was the language of sort of the clergy and the upper classes. And they started to write in vernacular, which is like your normal speech. What we're talking now is vernacular. Dante Alighieri wrote a book called The Divine Comedy. It was a really long poem. It's actually 3 parts, and it's a pretty crazy book. So it's about Dante himself having basically a midlife crisis, and then this sort of ethereal being, Virgil, takes him on a tour through hell, and then purgatory, and then heaven. The hell part's called the Inferno, in Italian Purgatorio and Paradiso, and in high school we had to read the Inferno, and it's basically Dante going through the circles of hell with Virgil and seeing a bunch of demons and different types of tortures for different types of sin. It's a pretty crazy book. Entertaining. I tried to read the Purgatorio, but it was really, really boring, because it's purgatory, and I didn't make it through it, so I never got to read about paradise or heaven. Sigh. If you look up some art from Dante's Inferno, you get some pretty crazy stuff. This one's pretty toned down, but it looks scary. The movie would probably be terrifying if they made it. On to the printing press. The printing press, as we know it, was invented by Johannes Gutenberg. Apparently, I think China had some kind of printing press, but they had so many characters that it wasn't very, like letters, they have multiple alphabets, that it didn't really work very well for them. So the printing press as we know it was invented by Johannes Gutenberg somewhere in the 1450s. It had metal movable type, so you could print one whole page at a time. It basically made bookmaking much, 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 much faster. And this was huge, because normal people, Joe Schmoes, were starting to learn how to read, but there weren't enough books. So the first book he printed was actually the Bible. Makes sense, they were still pretty religious in the Renaissance. And then more and more books were printed. They say that more books were created, physically created, in 50 years, the first 50 years of the printing press, than all other books in the rest of history combined. So all of a sudden, boom, book population doubles in 50 years. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, that was a big change. Effects on humanism. effects of humanism. So humanist scholars were interested in all the sciences. We said they were like taking a step back from religious and faith and looking at things scientifically. One of these great minds of the Renaissance was Leonardo da Vinci. Now, da Vinci had his hands in everything. He was cutting up dead bodies to learn about anatomy. Kind of creepy, but like that's how you learn. He was building designs for flying machines. I think a lot of people have seen da Vinci's ideas for flying machines like this one right here. And he even studied fossils to look at ancient life. Leonardo was an artist too. We're going to learn about him momentarily. Some more anyways. So the simple version of art in the Renaissance, people think of art when they think about the Renaissance, and that they started using different methods than they did use in the Middle Ages. For example, they started to try to paint people to look at how they actually look, so the paintings became lifelike, not all blocky and flat and funky. They used perspective, which is this idea that if you're drawing a picture and one thing is closer than the other thing's going to be far away, so it looked lifelike. And then they used lighting and shading. Basically, they got a lot better at art, and as I put it in here, the artwork stopped looking like something that came out of a 4th grade art class in elementary school. No offense, Middle Age artists, you did the best you could, but the Renaissance men, they had you topped pretty far. Famous Renaissance artists include Leonardo da Vinci, well, we'll talk about it in a minute. You've got Raphael, Sanzio, another Ninja Turtle, and Michelangelo. Michelangelo. You had Michelangelo. Buonarroti. It's a tough one. Da Vinci did the Mona Lisa, which is pretty famous, and the painting of the Last Supper that like a whole bunch of people have in their house. That was done by Da Vinci. Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel, which I think there's a picture of on your quiz, and Raphael did his most famous painting was called The School of Athens, which is right here. Pretty detailed for pretty old. Alright, a lot of those guys were all Italian, but the Renaissance spread northward. And so when we talk about the north, we refer to basically Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. Up north, they wanted paintings that looked more realistic as well, but they went about it in a different way. In Italy, the paintings were mostly water-based paints, and up in the north, they used oil-based paints, so the colors were a lot brighter and more defined. They would make finely detailed paintings of people that were also lifelike. They also used perspective to add depth to their art. Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is one of the more famous pieces of art from the north, done by Albrecht Dürer. It's actually not a painting, it's a wood carving, but it's very detailed and still kind of scary. What about the Renaissance in England, Mr. Young? Well, they had the Renaissance up there too. It just took a while to get there. It peaked around 1580, which was Elizabethan England, which is sort of like they really liked Queen Elizabeth. That was a pretty good time for England, a golden age. And they were into theater. Theater was the big form of art in England. The first playhouses, the stages were built. The first one in 1580. It was really cheap to go see a show, like 1 or 2 cents, so rich people would go, poor people would go, and while the seating was different, everyone could afford to go see these plays. Playwrights made a lot of stories about human weakness. The most famous English playwright was, of course, William Shakespeare. His famous works would be things like Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet, stories that are still retold to this very day. And there's a cool cutout picture of an English theater, a playhouse. They're pretty nifty. Okay, that's the lesson. You got your standard quiz here. Here's the roof of the Sistine Chapel, sort of famous artwork of Adam and God. And you've got your 10 points, 5 questions, multiple choice. That's for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good one. Got 2 attempts if you need them.